You could take a look at my mastering chain right here. So it's a little EQ, and this gets adjusted with every single beat. What I noticed with this exact setting, sometimes I'll turn this down a little bit. Basically, this is the loudest that I'll have this setting. So typically I'll get a little too much harshness from this section and maybe a little too much bass from this section, and I'll turn these down just a little bit, maybe like right about there. What I found with this EQ is that it just really makes the drums pop out a lot better, and it makes the bass stand out just a little bit better. And the reason why I'm doing this instead of the Parametric EQ2 is because of where these numbers are set. Another thing that I might adjust is the Q, so the bandwidth right here. I might narrow this or widen it, but basically where these numbers are set, 1500, 90 hertz, and 8K. Again, you might want to adjust exactly what frequency this is hitting to be 100% transparent with you. I'm typically just leaving this as is, and I might adjust the Q on the high end a little bit, but typically I just lower these down just a little bit, and I just do the on-off test. Does it sound better? Does it sound worse? And then I also turn down the volume to match any of the boost that I have here so that I'm still using the same amount of volume. So then I go into my parametric EQ, and it looks like this. It's nothing crazy. So I have a cut at 24 hertz. Sometimes I might move this up to as high as 30 hertz or 32 hertz. If you right click on this and you go to key, you could actually switch this to the key of your song. So say the lowest note in your 808 is C sharp. Well, I would go ahead and cut this to C sharp, and there you go. So now it's going to hit at that lowest note, and then what you could do is just back this off just a little bit. Again, you're going to be using your ears, so listen to what you're doing, what you're affecting, and just back it off to where you just feel more clarity in that bottom end. And trust me, even though I might add an EQ on my 808, I might cut right here. I might cut that up to 25, 30 hertz right here. I might cut it again with the EQ in my bass bus. And I'm adding another cut once again right here because I'm boosting in my parametric EQ right here, which very well might affect below some of the frequencies below. So it's just a quick little cleanup that I'm doing in the master. And then I also do that up above. So basically I just use my ears and I just cut this down until I get rid of any frequencies that I feel like aren't really bringing anything special to the mix. And I'll tell you right now, I've looked at a lot of different mixes using Voxengo Span, which I recommend you guys download. I've put it in a million videos now, but just go to voxengo.com and download Span and just look at the frequency ranges of your favorite mixes. And you'll see that you're not hearing sounds up to 2000 hertz. A lot of these are cut right around 15, 16 hertz. And there's a dramatic drop from 16 or 15 and above. I go ahead and do the same thing. I just cut out all those extra highs that are going to affect your limiter and cutting out the extra lows that are going to affect your limiter. That's how I'm getting cleaner sounding masters and more punchy masters because I'm only affecting frequencies that are the most important. Another thing that I might do, I'll grab either this 5 or 6 band, and typically vocals will sit somewhere between 1000 hertz to 3000 hertz. So I'll go ahead and take this band and just kind of just give it a soft little dip right around 2000, 1500. You're going to use your ears again and see if there's just something that opens up a space for where it sounds like, man, I could hear my vocals being right there in that pocket. And we're just looking for a dB and a half, maybe a dB of reduction because you're affecting the entire mix. And then I might just narrow this just a little bit and just kind of sweep around and see where the mix kind of just opens up a little bit for the vocals. And that gets sent into my limiter. You can see my limiting settings here. I have my curve set on 3 and my attack curve set on 3 and my release curve set on 7. Just play around with those curve settings if you'd like, but these stay the same for me every single time. So I have my ceiling set to -0.3 and my saturation going down just a dB. So I just have a little bit of saturation for tops of the peaks. That's also going to help you to be able to push the limiter just a little bit without being too harsh, because that saturation is going to soften your peaks up a little bit. And then I'm just taking this gain knob and driving it into this ceiling. So I have a really quick attack, a really quick release, a little bit of sustain, and all of these always get adjusted. So basically, I might increase the attack a little bit. What you'll notice is if you have this attack down to 0, which is something that I'm not going to name any names, but people have been recommending this for like a couple years now, where you just have all these set to 0, and you'll notice that you'll get distortion. If you're just using your ears, it's going to distort the mix. So you actually need to back these off just a little bit. It's okay to have the sustain to 0. Sometimes I do that. But really, this attack, having it set to 0, that's the easiest way to start distorting your master. So back off this attack a little bit. That will give the attack time to ramp up to the full amount of limiting, instead of limiting it right away. I wouldn't go past a millisecond. I'm talking about anything past a millisecond is actually a pretty long attack for a limiter. For FL's limiter anyway. It really depends on the company. But for FL's limiter, I just found that these really low incremental, like 0.5, 0.6, those attack times where you just have a little bit of a room for that limiter to ramp up to its full limiting, you'll be able to avoid that little hair of distortion that you start getting. And then also just using your ears for this release time, I would have it pretty quick, so that because you're dealing with the full mix, all we're trying to do is just catch those peaks and turn those peaks down and let go. And that's how you're going to get really transparent limiting. Having this at 0 to where it lets go immediately, that might work. Really, I'm more concerned about this attack time. But I'd say 99% of the time, I have a little bit of a release on there, so it sounds more natural. And also, that'll allow you to push this gain up a little bit more, because you're controlling those peaks just a little bit better with these quicker release times. Again, just like the attack time, I usually set this somewhere between 0.4 is like super fast, but somewhere between 0.4 and 1 millisecond as well. Same thing with the sustain. I might have the sustain up a little bit, but typically the longer that I have this release, the less that I'm using the sustain. So if you're closer to a millisecond, back this sustain down quite a bit, maybe even 0. What you'll notice in this mix bus that I have before this wave bus, I have a fruity filter, which just looks like this. And this is actually what's producing this waveform right here. So this gets sent to all my clients that order my track outs. And also, if anyone is having trouble with this mix right here, I send them this. So they get sent this dynamic mix. I know this is labeled dynamic and this is labeled peak, but this is dynamic compared to this. And this is my peak mix, where I actually have the full peaks and dips of the mix. This is actually the mix that is getting sent into the mastering chain before I master anything. And you'll hear that this sounds clean. This sounds like it's a finished product, and that's the way your mixes should sound. This filter is basically just doing a little bit of a high pass. Typically, this is the most extreme settings that I have, just like the EQ right here. So this is what I have on default, and then I just back this off just a little bit, bring some of the bass back in, and then I'll either decrease or increase the resonance, which is basically just taking the highs and the lows and just narrowing it, just like we are narrowing the highs and lows right here. So this resonance is affecting the low pass and the high pass, and even the band pass. If you had that turned up, it would be affecting that band pass, but it's narrowing or widening the ends of these filters. And basically, I'll just back this off just a little bit just to expand this high pass down so that I get even more of a bass response if I need it. I'll typically just try to high pass just enough to where I hear that the bass is getting affected, and then I'll just back it off just a little bit so that I'm getting the full bass response that is necessary, because you're really not going to hear too much that is going to affect you below 20 hertz. Definitely below 20 hertz, but even below 30 hertz, you'll find that you'll just end up with a cleaner mix if you're high passing even within that range too. And definitely use that trick with getting the key of the lowest bass note in your track and just cutting up to that point and then backing that off just a little bit, and you'll end up with a really clean mix. But yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment down below if you have any questions, and I will see you guys in the next one. Subscribe if you haven't already. Take care. Peace.